Have a good Saturday, everyone. I'm reading from this book, Queering Anarchism, and I'm reading from this chapter called Tyranny of the State and Trans Liberation. It's a chapter I've actually previously read before, and it's quite fascinating, and I wanted to share it with you because it has some interesting uh, concepts that really shines through in a lot of different ways that you don't see in anarchist circles, and especially in queer circles. And it does so in a beautiful way. And I've talked about this book before, and this specific chapter is an example of that, where they blend the two where they blend the two subjects of queerness, LGBTQ um, culture, and anarchist culture into a into a necessary um, a necessary discourse. So that's why I'm reading this chapter today. So the tyranny of the state and trans liberation. So that's what I'm going to be reading today, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. Let's do this. Tyranny of the state and trans liberation. And it starts with a couple quotations. STAR is a revolutionary group. We believe in picking up the gun and starting a revolution if necessary. Our main goal is to see gay people liberated and free. Marsha P. Johnson. Marsha P. Johnson being the trans woman, the black trans woman who threw the first brick at Stonewall. The next quote is, trans liberation is the phrase that has come to refer to all those who blur or bridge the boundary of the sex or gender expression they were assigned at birth. Cross-dressers, transsexuals, intersex. Okay. That is a dishwasher. Disregard the dishwasher. Let me see if I can stop that. That is a dishwasher. I am in the kitchen. Intersex people, two spirits, bearded females, masculine females, feminine males, drag kings, drag queens, trans liberation. I wish I would stop, my friends. Trans liberation is a call. One second. Okay. Trans liberation is a call to action for all those who care about civil rights and care in creating a just and equal society. Leslie Feinberg. Trans liberation beyond pink and blue. So this is the beginning of the chapter. Anarchists should understand that the importance in opposing the regulation of of sexual and gender behavior by governments and other allied forces, such as the church and capitalism. In fact, there has been a long history of anarchism as a movement and philosophy, recognizing and embracing the pivotal importance of sexual and gender liberation. Within this history, there has been a prominent role of queer anarchist radicals who kept this significant engagement at the forefront of radical anarchist movements and philosophy. Yet, despite the pioneering anarchist sex radicals at the turn of the century and those during the heyday of the gay, feminist, black liberation movements of the 60s and 70s, there has been an increasing trend of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBT liberation movements towards embracing the government and its role in regulating sexual and gender behavior. And this current liberation movement has worked in complicity with the state simply to broaden and reform the definitions and social norms of sex and gender, as well as focus on the assimilations of LGBT within the state through marriage reform. Don't ask, don't tell LGBT, don't ask, don't tell, and by enacting laws that seek to entrench and empower the police and incarceration system through increased funding and engagement through hate crime legislation. And we see a liberation movement that moved from a focus on fighting the state and its associated systems of corrupt police, politics, and social norms to a liberation model complicit with a state that is allied powers structures that make no excuse regarding its control, regulation, definition of, and legal boundaries regarding sexual behavior and gender identity and expression. This chapter details the historical roots and sex gender radicals within the anarchist movement as well as within other allied liberation movements. From this historical perspective, we can re-examine the state of the LGBT liberation movement and attempt to solidify and redefine a trans liberation movement outside the current so-called LGBT liberation movement. The aim of this chapter is to reconsider trans liberation within the context of the current social, economic, and political environment of a global LGBT movement led by marriage advocates. It can also be viewed from a global lens. In this process, it is hoped to reveal that the core of the trans existence and persona is radical and anarchistic, if not insurrectionary, in its embodiment, such that pure liberation of sex and gender will not come through complicit reform within the state, but rather through rejecting the state and its many social constructs. All right, so that's the first section. All right, the next section is called Queer Anarchist Sexual Radicals 1850 to 1930, aka the first wave sexual liberation. Let's do this. During the late 19th and early 20th century, there emerged an articulation of politics, of homosexuality,
In 1897 Berlin, the German sexologist and sex radical Mungus Hirschfeld and several colleagues formed the Scientific Humanitarian Committee, SHC, the world's first homosexual rights organization. The members of the SHC were radical intellectuals who helped concentrate new understandings of homosexuality and championed new political goals and ideas, as well as a strong critique of oppressive social norms and values. During this first wave of sexual liberation, many of these radical intellectuals shaped new understandings and forms of same-sex political and social consciousness that have immediate and long-term impacts on the lives of European people. Within the United States, unlike Europe, the politics of sex radicals did not arise from a blossoming homosexual rights movement. Instead, it arose from the anarchist movement of the time. Anarchist sex radicals like Emma Goldman, Alexander Berkman, Leonard Abbott, John William Lloyd, and Benjamin R. Tucker wrote books, articles, and lectured across the United States regarding same-sex love. Emma Goldman, from 1869 to 1940, is without question the first person to openly lecture on homosexual liberation, emancipation, and openly supported Oscar Wilde against his persecutors. Though not an anarchist himself, Mungus Hirschfeld praised Emma Goldman as the first and only woman, indeed, one could say the first and only human being of importance in America to carry the issue of homosexual love to the broadest layer of the public. The U.S. anarchists of the time were unique in articulating a political critique of American social and legal rules, as well as the societal norms that regulated relationships. In this effort, and through the leveraging of anarchist movements of the time, they were able to center homosexuality within the political debate. By doing so, they created a fundamental shift in the sexual, cultural, and political landscape of the United States, not only during their time, but also for decades to follow. As Terence Kissack notes, the anarchist sex radicals were interested in the ethical, social, and cultural place in homosexuality within society, because that question lies at the nexus of individual freedom and state power. The anarchist sex radicals examined the question of same-sex love because policemen, moral arbitrators, doctors, clergymen, and other authorities sought to regulate homosexual behavior. So we see that during the first wave period of European, let me try that sentence one more time. So we see that during this first wave period within Europe, much of the dialogue by sexual radicals was around the civil rights and educational venue with a focus on acceptance within the constructs of the state. However, the anarchist US radicals, sex radicals, did not come to the issue of sex liberation, though through a lens of homosexual identity and reform, but rather from a more fundamental and radical anarchist alternative, denouncing the principles of the state and its allies' powers structure within the church and its mandate of alternative. Hold on, that threw me off. 1 second. Of alternative. Oh, I'm sorry. Of its mandate of adherence to social norm. Okay, there we go. Got it. Following World War I and the passing of the 1918 Sedition Act, sex radicals and the anarchist movement began a sharp decline as many of the activists were in prison or deported, and their vital propaganda vehicles were shut down. And not much later, on May 6, 1933, the Nazis took power within Germany and attacked Hirschfeld Institute and burned many of its books. So there came about a closing of this first wave sexual liberation, and as the state in both the United States and Germany commenced its crackdown on sex radicals and the revolutionary dialogue around sexual liberation that they have created. All right, so that was the second section. We just read the introduction, we just read the second section, and we're going to go into the next section, section 3, which is homophile movement, which is 1930 to 1969. 69. Please forget the dishwasher. It can be a little annoying, but it's gonna have to stick with. You're gonna have to stick with it. And second wave sexual liberation. All right. I'm having fun reading this. This is actually a really good read. And it's not too long, actually. We can actually finish this within the stream. It's good. It's good literature. It's really good literature. I'm really enjoying this. Anyway, let's continue. Again, please forgive this. You're gonna have to forgive this. Anyway, homophile movement of 1930 to 1969, aka the second wave sexual liberation. By the late 1930s, the anarchist movement and sex radicals were a shell of their original heyday of the late 19th and early 20th century. Coincidental with the decline in the anarchist movement, we saw a rise of the Communist Party, CP, as the primary vehicle of the left. Sex radicals of this period began to work under a left that was dominated by the CP, which marginalized the ideas, plural, and ideology of their anarchist predecessors. The CP was an organization that, contrary to the anarchists, enforced uniformity of belief and action. And in regards to homosexuality, the CP had a policy of discouraging memberships of gays and lesbians who refused to be silenced about their private lives. clearly a 180-degree reversal from, from the beliefs and actions of the anarchist sex radicals like Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman. In theory, the CP enacted the first don't act, don't tell policy against homosexuals. Wow, I actually did not know that when I first read this. I actually did not know that. Even though many prominent sex radicals and homosexuals of the left were CP. Let's see. Okay. Whether it was state actions against sex radicals and anarchists following World War One, or the rise of the sex radicals oppressive CP, the second string of a sexual radical movement did not begin to arise until after World War II. And sadly, many contemporary histories of gay movements in the United States have focused not on the sexual radicals and anarchists of the first wave of sexual liberation, but rather on this second wave post-war era with a focus on the organizations and individuals who shared the primary reformist view of gay liberation. Following World War One, there were no sustained homosexuals or sex radicals movements until 1948, with the publication from the Kinsey report titled "Sexual Behavior in the Human Male," and in the 1953 with the publication of the study titled "Sexual Behavior in the Human Female." That's pretty binary, if you ask me. I'm just commenting right there. I'm trying not to comment too much on this, but I'll keep the comments to a minimum because I want to focus on the reading. Anyway, both of these reports astounded the general public and were instantly controversial and sensational. The findings, quote, the findings caused shock and outrage, both because they challenged conventional beliefs about sexuality and because they discussed subjects that had previously been taboo. Yet we learned from the first wave radicals that this was far from the first open discussion about sex, sexuality, and gender. Rather, rather than this dialogue arising from radical intellectuals and anarchists, it instead arose from the mainstream scientific community and sexologists. These reports, as did the writing lectures of the first wave sexual radicals, permanently altered, quote, natural or nature of the public discourse of sexuality, as well as society's perception of its own behavior. These publications were widely read and revealed to the general public that a large number of men and women engaged in same-sex love. Also, during the period of Henry Hay, 1912 to 2002, a prominently gay man within the second wave sexual liberation movement, founded in 1950 the Machete Society. The Harry Hay was, hold on, sorry, one second. the first enduring LGBT rights organization within the United States. Harry Hay was a prolific vocal advocate for the gay liberation movement, as as Hay framed in those days, the homophile movement. I don't know, the word homophile is a interesting word. I don't know, I never thought about that before. But okay. Hay learned that he learned we're gonna have to deal with it again. If you're new to the stream, we're gonna have to deal with the dishwasher. My apologies. Anyway, Hay learned about activism and organizing during his early days within the CP, again, Communist Party. However, in order for him to pursue his sexual politics, he needed to leave the CP in order, since the CP did not allow gays to be members. During this onset of the Mattachine Society and the homophile movement, we saw the rise of the lesbian counterpart of the Mattachine, Daughters of Billetists, as well as One Incorporated. The publishers of One magazine, the first U.S. pro-gay publication. I did not know that, actually. However, the dialogue was far different from that of the first wave sexual radicals who challenged and critiqued the constraints and oppressions of the state. This is where things get interesting. The second wave dialogue was centered on identity, whether homosexuality was a mental illness, and improving homosexuals' standing within a capitalistic and hierarchical state, as well as seeking to exercise the rights to congregate in bars without fear of arrest, and to distribute their magazines through the state-controlled postal system. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. In many respects, this movement represented an organizational movement like Hirschfield SHC, and opposed to the individual discourse and writings of the anarchist sex radicals. In 1948, Harry Hayes understood that activating the political potential of homosexuals in the United States depends, in Marxist terms, on their becoming a class for itself, aware of their common interest, rather than merely a class within itself, without consciousness of themselves as a class mobilization of gays and lesbians for gay issues in chimerical. Chimerical? That's a new word to me. Okay. That is chimerical. Chimerical. I think that word is chimerical. Anyway, without a broad base of people representing themselves in politics, the project of liberation just devolves to political action, committees, and single issue lobbying. We see the root in the U.S. state of a strong sense of identity and its relationship to effecting social change and movement building. It is a very different liberation tactics from that of the anarchist sex radicals who did not seek to reform legal code or lobby politicians in order to stop bar raids. Instead, the vision for the vision for change of anarchist sex radicals was more fundamental, a radical alternative to the existing state system, which cannot be reformed but must be totally dismantled for a true liberation for all. All right, so that's the next section that we just read. How much more do we have? I don't think we have too much more. Let me see. I would like to check. All right, I think we have one more section. Let me double check. I am double checking here. We have two more sections, I think. But the next section is like a page. Yeah, we have two more sections. The next section is like really short. And it's really short. I'm gonna have some coffee. Really good coffee, black coffee. And how many viewers do we have here? We have 5 viewers. Wonderful. How is everyone? Thanks for joining me. If you are new to the stream, we're reading Queering Anarchism. We're reading a chapter called Tyranny of the State and Trans Liberation. So far, this is mainly about LGBT liberation, but it'll probably get to trans liberations exclusively, but I'm interested in seeing where this is going here. But it does have to get to a little bit of background history as well. Let me see, what's going on here. Oh yes, it does get into trans liberation. It does. So we're actually in for a treat. I'm really interested in that. So yes, enjoy. Just sit back and relax and enjoy. And honestly, I'm having a good time. I hope you are having a good time. And yeah, so I'm Skylar Sabo, and this is I like to read. This is what I like to do. I don't normally read well, but you know what? I think reading back and forth like this, it's a good position for me. Anyway, I'm gonna read the next section, which is Gay Liberation, 1969 to 1989, aka the third wave sexual liberation. That's the next one. Let's do it. All right. It may be apropos to start this section with a quote from an article by Dennis Altman, whose book Homosexual Oppression and Liberation, 1972, was viewed as a definitive writing on the subject of ideas that shaped gay liberation of this time as, quote, a relatively small group of white middle-aged males are in a position to make major decisions to define the boundaries within which all of us must function. It is by and large this group who benefit from the existing distribution of resources, the productivity of American capitalism, and the success of the ideological persecution are such that the great majority of persons rally to defend this system that enables this minority to maintain their dominance. Altman warned that commercialization and capitalism threatened the sexual revolution. The capitalist class promulgates, that's a new word for me, promulgates, successfully their dominant ideological, dominant, okay, let me read that sentence again. The capitalist class promulgates successfully their dominant ideology, and it is reflected in institutions in this society. It is, amongst other things, anti-sex, gender liberatory. That is a good sentence, actually. I like that sentence. The start of this phase in this liberation movement dates from the Stonewall Riots in 1969, when a police raid on a Greenwich Village bar called the Stonewall Inn provoked a series of riots that mobilized drag queens, street hustlers, lesbians, and gay men, many of whom have been politicized by the ongoing police brutalization of queer street youth, as well as the civil rights and anti-war movement. The second wave of sexual liberation viewed the struggle for sexual liberation through a politically conservative homophile civil rights movement, although their calls for social acceptance of same-sex love and transgender people were seen as radical views by the dominant culture of the time. However, at the onset of the third wave, the Stonewall Riots crystallized a broad grassroots mobilization across the country. Many early participants in the movement for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people's rights were also involved in various leftist causes of the 1960s, including the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the students movement, and the feminist movement. However, this early gay liberation movement took a radical departure from their second wave counterparts. The first political organization formed in the wake of the Stonewall Riots was the Gay Liberation Front. I love the name of that group. The organization named in honor of the National Liberation Front. Oh man. In honor of, oh man. The Vietnamese resistance. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I misread that. Okay. The Vietnamese resistance movement. Okay. I thought it was a Nazi thing. Okay, my bad. Okay, I was too quick to read it. My apologies. Okay. So the organization was named in honor of the National Liberation Front, the Vietnamese resistance movement, and a gesture towards the unity of the struggle of blacks, the poor, women, and the colonized of the third world. All right, that makes more sense now. One early flyer distributed in the Bay Area in January of 1970 proclaimed the Gay Liberation Front is a nationwide coalition of revolutionary homosexual organizations, created a radical counterculture within homosexual lifestyles. Politically, it is part of the radical movement working to suppress and eliminate discrimination and opposition against homosexuals in industry, the mass media, governments, schools, and churches. At this point, in the evolution of the liberation movement, we begin to see a transition from a focus of identity-based politics and working within the state and its arms from the opposition, prisons, legal aid, and police, to a conscious, similar to the early sex radicals, where total radical change of the system was mandated, albeit this consciousness was short-lived during this wave. Still, the importance of the early stages of gay liberation movement is critical to our eventual understanding of trans liberation. During the 1960s, we saw the rise of an anti-authoritarian movement where full liberation was intrinsically tied to the liberation of all oppressed communities. Excuse me? Yeah, be it the gay and lesbian brothers and sisters, street youth, trans folks, people of color, or feminists. In these early days, following the rebellious at Compton, in these early days, following the rebellious at Compton 1966 and Stonewall, many gay and lesbian and trans activists aligned with organizations like the Gay Liberation Front, the Young Lords, the Black Panthers, etc. The liberation politics at the time aimed at abolishing the oppressive institutions that reinforced traditional sex roles and a freeing individuals from the constraints of a sex gender system that locked them into mutually exclusive roles of homosexual, heterosexual, and feminine masculine. That's the end of the sentence. Okay. I don't know what else to do there. Gay and implicitly trans liberation advocated a radical transformation only after sex and gender categories had been eradicated. During this period, there were two prominent revolutionary organizations that were formed. The Gay Liberation Front, formed a month after the Stonewall Rebellion, and the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, also known as STAR, formed following the occupation of the Weinstein Hall at NYU in September of 1970. The GLF statement was purpose explained. Quote, "We are a revolutionary group of men and women formed with the realization that complete sexual liberation for all people cannot come about unless existing social institutions are abolished. We reject society's attempt to impose sexual roles and definitions of our nature." STAR advocated for an inclusive gay liberation that strongly embraced trans rights, nurtured homeless street youth, and worked to create a communal trans family unit. They worked to dismantle the very state institutions of a capitalistic society that they deemed responsible for their oppression. In the publication by STAR, they noted in closing, quote, "We want a revolutionary people government where transvestites, street people, women's homosexuals, Puerto Ricans, Indians, and all oppressed peoples are free and not fucked over by this government who treat us like the scum of the earth and kill us like flies, one by one, and throw us into jail to rot. This government who spends millions of dollars to go to the moon and let the poor Americans starve to death. Both the GLF and STAR formed during the early stages of this third wave sexual liberation, but were undone by ideological factions within the gay liberation movement. Hi, Leo. Come here.
This is my family's dog, Leo. I don't know if you can see him. This is my family's dog, Leo. Hi. Oh, come here, boy. Hello, boy. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. You're a good boy.
Okay, I'm gonna keep reading, okay? I'm gonna keep reading, okay, boy? I'm gonna keep reading, okay? I'm gonna keep reading, okay, boy? You're such a good boy. Such a good boy. I love you. I love you, boy. Okay, I'm gonna keep reading.
So we were where they split off into factions.
All right.
In the case of STAR and the budding trans liberation portion of the movement, the severe fractions of the movement unveiled itself in 1973. Christopher Street Liberation Day rally, the bitterly
Public feud.
Stylavia Rivera storming the stage to speak out for imprisoned trans folks and street youth. John O'Vera of the lesbian feminist liberation, condemning men who impersonated women for entertainment and profit, and Lee Browster at the Queen's Liberation Front, cascading lesbian for their refusal to let drag queens be themselves, thereby exposing
The dramatically contrasting views of the meaning of gay liberation. In the case of GLF, it was a move from the multi-issue movement, building a single issue, white-dominated, legislative, focused vision dominated by GLF successors. The Gay Activist Alliance.
That sounds cringe as hell. At the beginnings of the third wave, we saw an anarchist-style tendency similar to the first wave, radicals of the United States, who realized their true liberation was intrinsically and necessarily tied to the liberation of their gay and lesbian brothers and sisters, people of color, and feminists, while maintaining a common fundamental rejection of the state, its capitalist institutions, and the church. However, in the mid-70s onward, This anarchist-style liberation, the liberationist framework became less important to the dominant gay and lesbian organizations who increasingly favored an ethnic model that emphasized community identity and cultural difference as originally championed by the homophile movement. Today, we can see that marriage equality is a core example of identity-based politics and operates to the exclusion of other desiring non-traditional families and relationships, not requiring state sanction or regulation. In essence, sexual liberation evolved from the precept of the anarchist liberations into an assimilationist and identified based liberation to quote, different but equal under the law of the state. During the middle part of this period, as the mainstream LGBTQ organizations, media, and the community embraced assimilation within a capitalistic society, there was an ever-present undercurrent of radical social change organization such as ACT UP, Outrage, and other separatist and non-assimilationist politics. The evolving area of queer theory, which was originally associated with the radical gay politics of these queer organizations, developed into an examination of the perceived limitations of the traditional identity of recognition and self-identity. All right, so that was the next section. I'm going to take a little bit of a breath break. I think this is the last section. Let me just double check.
All right. Yep. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 pages left.
How many viewers do we have? We have 6 viewers. Wonderful. We have wonderful 6 viewers. Wonderful. Awesome. All right. So this last section is called Transliberation, aka the 4th wave sexual and gender liberation. Thank you all for sticking with me today. I really appreciate it. And if you're new here, my name is Skylar Sabo, and I have been doing very well. I really have been having fun reading this to you all. And be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you have done more. After this, we will do a reflection about this chapter, and I'll read your comments. So yeah. Anyway, let's do this.
Transliberation, aka the 4th wave of sexual and gender liberation. A semblance of a trans-liberation movement of today is rooted within the predominant gay movement of the 80s to present, a hierarchical, identity-based, single-issue, gender-conforming free market and state electoral-based movement. Whew. Golly. Yet, as noted in the introduction, the trans community defines the accepted social constructs of sex and gender of free market capitalism, and the state with its need for society adherence to strict social norms, constructs, in order to maintain itself in order to maintain an operating system of power, keeping its focus on assimilation within a system that, by definition, constrains the core concept of trans. As we learned from revolutionary history of gay liberation within the context of GLF and STAR, we understand that their vision for emancipation was dependent upon radical social change. STAR, in its call for, quote, full voice in the struggle of liberation of all people, and the demand for identification of the of the opposite gender, not oppressed, I misspoke, for transvestite foreshadowed the queer theoretical contention of the biological sex is not equal to gender, as well as the affirmation of gay liberation's refusal to assimilate. With the evolution of queer theory in the early 1990s, more than 2 decades after Stonewall, we see that the promotion of radical social change, both similar and yet different to that of the first wave anarchist sex radicals and the gay and trans liberationists of the early phase of the third wave queer theory, has expounded upon and extended the challenges set forth by our anarchist sex and gender radicals by challenging not just the categories of sex orientation and gender, identity, but also their of categories per se. Whew. Running out of breath. Give me. I might have to take some seconds to take a breath. So I'm almost done. The subjective interpretations of sexuality within queer theory subverts any monolithic traditional notation of sex, roles, and gender, and even sexual orientation. Some queer theorists, as with anarchist sexual liberationists, rather than demanding inclusion, equal rights, and the end of discrimination dominated by the current LGBT mainstream, challenge the core assumption of society and the normative construction of sexuality. Whereas anarchists and anarchist theory need to look at struggles on the conceptual level that queer theory provides. Queer theory needs to be coupled with anarchism's critique of structural domination, such as the state and capitalism. Trans people, as laid out by anarchist sex radicals, gay liberationists, and queer theorists, defy society's precepts of gender identity and expression, and challenge at its core societal's religious and state demands and constructs. Sadly, I fear that we, as truly inherently revolutionary peoples, will instead seek the safe route of assimilation, as some of our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters have done before us. Yet, through serious reflection, political analysis, and dialogue, particularly those through an anarchist lens, I
I postulate that we can avoid the same reformist road that the majority of the homosexual movements have been trapped in. To this point, I have remarked over many years how ironic it is that the transsexual person defines society's constructs of men and women, while at the same time, many of our community work so very hard to subscribe to a binary system that our bodies defy. Granted, this is a complicated analysis, and there are many reasons for strong subscribing back to the binaries, major drivers being safety and survival. At the same time, it is something that we as a community as individuals must seriously challenge. For me, it is clear that any so-called liberation movement for the trans community today is like its straight and liberation counterparts entrenched within an assimilated and capitalistic framework. Hold on, let me get the okay. Within a capitalistic framework. And in this liberation framework, the trans community is still securing parts. I'm sorry. The trans community is still securing its liberation to the same wagon as its gay and lesbian counterparts. If we are to liberate society and ourselves from the tyranny against those who traverse gender and sex, we liberate ourselves from the mental and physical constructs that manipulate us into subordination or the benefit of the greater good of society, religion, and the state. It is now time for the trans community to embrace and continue the militant and revolutionary path of our elders laid out before us. If we are seeking revolutionary rather than reformist changes. So a key tenet of trans liberation lies within liberation of oneself and others from tyranny of the state, religion, and society. And equality is important for our own self-imposed tyranny. And with that said, viewing trans liberation with an anarchist lens has proven an invaluable vehicle for such an analysis, as Emma Goldman so eloquently stated in her 1911 essay, Anarchism, What It Really Stands For. Quote, anarchism is the only philosophy that brings to man the consciousness to himself, which maintains that God and the state and others and society are non-existent, that their promises are null and void, since they can be fulfilled only through man's subordination. Anarchism is therefore the teacher of the unity of life, not merely in nature, but in man. Challenging the state is a daunting and challenging task for all oppressed people. And for me personally, I am a strong believer in civil disobedience and direct action when the cause and reason are just. However, the fear of challenging the state as a non-operative trans person is a significant challenge and barrier to putting my belief into action. My heart and soul told me that not acting upon my beliefs, I was allowing the state to control my individual expression, preventing my rebellion of a system that works to subjugate my individual identity. I actually needed to go through a 2-year process of dealing with a consciousness and subconsciousness fear of being controlled by the system. It turns out that through a long and convoluted process, I was able to put my individual beliefs ahead of those of submission to and fear of the state's control of my gender identity. Oddly, one night before an affinity group and I, to risk arrest, shutting down the government building in New York, a dear friend of mine saw the opening of V for Vendetta. For me, the transformation of Evie Hammond was pivotal for me personally. I mean, was pivotal to my personal transformation. For those who are not familiar with Evie's transformation, I'll paste the following from a wiki on V.
And this is the link. This is the this right here is the quote. In her cell, between multiple bouts of interrogation and torture, Evie finds a letter from an inmate named Valerie, an actress who was in prison for being a lesbian. Evie's interrogator finally gives her a choice of collaboration or death. Inspired by Valerie's courage and quiet defiance, she refuses to give in and is told that she is free. To her shock, Evie learns that her imprisonment was a hoax, constructed by V, designed to put her through an ordeal similar to the one that shaped him. He reveals that Valerie was another Larkill prisoner who died in the cell next to his. The letter that Evie read is the same one that Valerie had passed to V. Evie's anger finally gives way to acceptance of her identity and freedom. The heart of this point was reinforced at the recent demo protesting of the hypocrisy of human rights campaign, where one of the chants included the words "fuck you, HRC." Several people asked with all seriousness, are we allowed to say that? Then, when the first police car came, they were convinced that the police were called because of our use of the word "fuck you." In reality, the cops didn't really give a damn when what we were chanting about. Clearly, the surface is that this is all kinds of silly and nit, except for the fact that the reaction and fear that of this trans person typifies the implicit warning of Emma Goldman, that the tyranny of or fear of such tyranny by the state has profound impact of our actions and behaviors. This clearly ties in very closely with our goals in achieving trans liberation. All right, so if you want to see the citations, they are right here. I'll try to give you a good look at them. There you go. All right, so that was the chapter. Hi. Okay. Whew.
That was a lot. So I'm going to reflect on what I read. Well, the first thing I want to talk about is that, let me get my coffee. Coffee is good. The first thing I want to talk about is that, there is a history. I mean, today there is a history of LGBTQ liberalism, and there has been a history of LGBTQ liberalism, but there also is a history of LGBTQ radicals, and it definitely shows within this chapter alone. And it seems to me that they have been conflicting with each other, and there's always been a sort of a battle between reform versus total independence from the state. And I think what the chapter is kind of missing, though, just a little bit. I mean, it's really good it's really good. I liked what this chapter had to say, but this chapter is missing a Marxist analysis just a little bit, because you have to understand, in order to, I'm not saying that you need to have a Marxist analysis, right? I'm not saying you need to advocate a state, but what Marxism can offer, right, is a dual power structure, in Marxist theory, and that's essentially what I've learned from talking with other Marxists that I didn't know as an anarchist. And when you're trying to build dual power structures away from capitalism, that could essentially mean things like what you're trying to do so far with abolishing capitalism is create trans LGBT clinics that give HRT and Pap smears and STD testing and healthcare essentials for away from capitalism, aside from capitalism, independent from capitalism. And that's really important, because right now in the United States, you either need to have insurance or you need to go online and you need to have a lot of money and buy it illegally. So, and I don't recommend self-medication, because a lot of that stuff is very dangerous. I'm talking from a person who is on HRT. I am on HRT. And I would highly recommend, if you're going to be on HRT, you need to see a doctor. And I highly recommend that doctors, especially right now with the pandemic, they need to be organized and they need to be unionized, especially nurses right now, especially nurses. So the point of the matter is that what is important is that these it's a good chapter. It's a good chapter, but I just felt like that was kind of missing, and I felt like that was important. But in terms of trans liberation and the concept of addressing the binary structures of our government and things like that, I thought it addressed it really well. However, I thought and maybe it doesn't address it in this chapter. Maybe it addresses it in another chapter, but because I just felt that maybe white supremacy is a structure. It's a power structure within our government that also is a binary structure, and I felt that it could have also talked a little bit about that, and it also talks, the fact that white supremacy literally creates a binary structure within trans people. Look, okay, today, right now, you know what's going on in Boston?
there are National Socialists at a straight pride rally. That is happening today. That is happening today. If you didn't know that, you can go on Twitter and you can find that out. That is happening today. So, yep, that is really happening. It's not just Blue Lives Matter. It's not just Patriot Front. It is National Socialists. Straight up Nazis. So, yep. So anyway, essentially what I'm trying to say is that the like white supremacy is a binary structure that literally oppresses the trans community, and I just felt that this chapter also could have addressed it as well, because it just, while it did address the binary structure a little bit, I just felt that it didn't address it. It didn't address white supremacy, which I talked about white supremacy on my channel quite a bit, and I've kind of like talked about it. I kind of talked about the subject just on an intellectual level, just a little bit. So, because I've read up on it for a while, so I just decided, maybe this specific author, because this book has multiple authors. This book has multiple authors. It's not just one author, it's multiple authors. Maybe white supremacy will come up again in a different chapter. And that's perfectly okay. I'm not dissing it. It's totally all right. And I'm not critiquing the author either. So what else is there? I thought that it was really good that it talked about Emma Goldman, and it kept bringing up Emma Goldman. I thought, however, it could have brought up, some points from Alexander Berkman some more. He definitely brought up Alexander Berkman, he mentioned Alexander Berkman, but it's almost as if he just kind of mentioned it just because, he's like Emma Goldman's homie, and it's just like, I don't know, it's like Alexander Berkman has a lot of really good books on on how society functions. I mean, granted, Alexander Berkman doesn't have any books as far as I'm aware of, Alexander Berkman doesn't have any books or articles that I'm aware of on queer theory that are exclusive on it. But he has, I have read a couple books, such as What is Communist Anarchism, that does address relationships and how anarchist relationships go hand in hand with each other, and how society and how the state essentially oppresses people's relationship into a what would you call a nuclear family, especially as early as their day, which I thought was kind of revolutionary at the time. So I just felt like they could have elaborated on that just a little bit. I guess I'm kind of critiquing this. I'm kind of critiquing this chapter, but I feel like this chapter is so good. I had so much fun reading it. I honestly did. In fact, actually, I was reading really well. Honestly, I have a reading level of a fourth grader. I really do, but I had so much fun reading it. I was really into it, and I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot from it. I learned history. I learned some history about anarchism, and I learned history about sexual liberation. I even learned a lot from the Stonewall Riots and things like that I wasn't really too aware of. I learned about the Gay Liberation Front that I actually did not know about, and the fact that they did that. Oh, and the SHC, that was really cool. Excuse me, and that was awesome. I think it's a really good chapter. Let me just say something right here. If you haven't read this book already, if you haven't gotten your hands on this book already, you should definitely pick this book up, because it's a great book. it's an honest. I don't want to say honest to God because I don't like saying honest to God. I don't like using the word God as in a positive way. Unless you believe in God, I respect your views on God. But personally, I don't. I go by no gods, no masters. But if you want to get this book, you should just get this book. Anyway, I'm gonna read your comments. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I am reading this. Let's see. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the compliment on my skirt. I feel really beautiful in this skirt, honestly. Like I feel I feel myself in the skirt actually. That's why I wanted to wear it on camera. Like it makes me feel really like yeah. Honestly, the dishes were the star of the show. The dishes were the star of the show. And seriously, like they were the star. It's all. I'm sorry. They interrupted the stream a little bit, but you got to do what you got to do. You know, you got to do the dishes. You know, I love the enthusiasm. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we addressed this. It's not the Algerian independence, right? It's not the Algerian independence army. It's the well, I don't know. I don't know if there's another one, a National Liberation Front, but we addressed it while we were reading it. But we addressed it. It's the Vietnamese Liberation Front, like Luna, like Luna, like Luna Oi. Luna is a comrade. I'm glad you all like my dog. Glad you all like my dog. I don't know if you're cringing about Mojo. I don't. You're probably cringing about something that's in the book. Probably something from the book. I understand it. I understand what it is. Anyway, I'm sweating a little bit. Let's see. Oh yeah, Oh yeah, that makes sense now. Actually, that totally makes sense. It's probably because of something liberal that came up in the book. That makes more sense. Let's see. My teenage son was asking in the narrow, angry eye why gay cops march with us in pride and black cops and Black Lives Matter. You know what? I have no, and you said you have no satisfactory answer. You know what? That's a hard question to follow. You know what? I had a conversation with a comrade of mine, with a new African comrade of mine who identifies as a Marxist Leninist Maoist, and as a white person, I can't answer that personally. Like I have no place in this world to answer that, and it's like it's unfortunate it's unfortunate that like we live in a society where that exists. It's just that like it's a weird contradiction that we have, and the only thing I can say really is that like I just feel that like maybe like some people within society, like some black people and some LGBT people, like have felt that they can achieve the American dream and felt that like they can achieve like an opportunity within the capitalist system as a means of succeeding in life, and that usually means stepping on other people and oppressed people. That's probably the only that's the only answer I can honestly give without giving like a bad take on it. That's really the only answer I can give. When was this book written? Well, again, this book had multiple authors, but I can tell you when it was published. This edition was published in 2012. Let's see. I enjoyed listening to you read, Skylar. I must admit I wasn't focusing, but it was nice to have it on the background. Hey, that's totally fine by me. After all I was doing was just pacing back and forth. It's not like I was doing jumping jacks or anything. It's totally fine. Love plaid skirts. Hey, plaid skirts are fashionable as hell. If you know, honestly, I ordered a plaid skirt and it came in the mail and it didn't fit me. But you know what? I'm gonna try to get a plaid skirt that fits me one day because I want to look good in it. And thank you so much. Like, you want to see what it looks like down here? Like, just I mean, it's not like super short or anything. I have pants on, but like, my goodness, like I look amazing in it. Like, my gosh, I love it. It looks amazing. I love it. I love it so much. Oh, and by the way, this is my mom's dog, Chewy. My mom's dog, Chewy, right here. Hold on, wait. Chewy, Chewy. That's my mom's dog, Chewy. Chewy, hey, hi. You okay? Is that? I'll play with her when I'm done with the stream. She's sad that Mama's gone. Anyway. And I think I finished the comments. So, get this book if you haven't already. I think I'm going to read this book again when I do another stream sometime. And if you enjoyed this video, share the video, like, comment, subscribe, because I'm a total loser. And have a great one. Bye. I love you all. Mwah.